Welcome to the podcast, Holly. It's absolutely brilliant to have you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
Oh, it's such a good question. So my money story is that I came from not much money. So I came from a very working class background. My dad was a welder. My mum worked in a bank. Money was sparse, I mean, I was lucky enough to have a house and have, I never ever felt like I had less than, by the way. I was surrounded with people, some of whom had a lot less than me, but everyone was around the same level. So I never felt, oh, I didn't have anything. I guess I was aware we didn't have the branded trainers and stuff like that. And money was, it was a conversation. I was aware of things being put on credit cards. I was aware of, turn the lights off. And, I was aware of money not being like in abundance, I guess. So that was my kind of growing up. And then when I was 11, I got my first acting job. So my background is TV acting. And I got my first job. And suddenly at 11 years old, I was making money. Now, obviously, that was different to any of my peers. And I actually didn't get the money at the time. It was just put in a bank account for me. And to be honest, at 11, like it wasn't even in my mind that there was money coming. I was just chuffed that I was an actress and doing the things that I loved. It wasn't a desire for money. It wasn't an adult sort of mind. So I think growing up as the kid on the telly who people were aware was being paid for what they were doing, I was then party to conversations and comments about money. And those comments would be largely negative, or they would be just kind of sweeping. So it would be things like, well, if you got 100 quid for your dinner money, or well, I remember one conversation and it was actually with a family member, and it was a silly comment, but those things stick with you and build beliefs around them.
Absolutely.
And the comment was, I was talking about wanting a new phone, very early days. It's probably a Nokia 3210 or something like that.
Love those phones.
Oh, we loved them. And so I was talking about that, and the comment from a cousin or something, it wasn't any, and there was no malice in it, but it was, well, why can't you buy your own phone? You make more money than my mum. And it wasn't said in a negative way, and it was probably just a jokey throwaway comment, but it really sat with me. And there was a few things like that around money that over time I didn't realize. Obviously, as I've done work on my mind and money and things like that, I recognized what had started to happen was that I had created this negative feeling around money that when I make money, it makes other people feel uncomfortable. That it sets me as the other, because, suddenly I had this pressure of being from a working class, normal background, but everyone being aware she's making money. The reality was I didn't actually have it in my hands, at the time. But there was an awareness of that, which made me the other, which made me feel like I wanted to fit in more, especially when you're younger. And so I have recognized that there are patterns of behavior for me that when I see a lump sum of money come in at one time, that there's this pull subconsciously to want to get rid of that or sabotage what's happening, because there's so much fear around, but if you have money, other people don't like you. If you have money, you are different. If you have money, you make other people feel uncomfortable because they've got less than. And so that's something that I've done a lot of work on. But as we know, with limiting beliefs, it's like whack-a-mole, isn't it? They spring up with a different hat on and you weren't expecting them. So I'm very aware that for me, money it is always a driver for everybody. And because of always being, for a lot of my work, I've never had a steady job. In fact, my first job as an actor was my longest job. It was 7 years on a TV show. So the longest time I've been in one space. The rest of my world has been very, in reality, feast or famine. It's been contract work. It's been me as my own boss. And so that had made me very, I would kind of hoard money. I was a money hoarder, and I have that tendency to do that and not want to spend. Obviously, no doubt you talk about this on here, but you have to speculate to accumulate, you have to spend to get back, and that has been something there's been a lot of fear around for me. And there's also the added element in terms of money and numbers that, although I don't have a diagnosis of this, I'm fairly confident that I would have. I'm fairly confident I would have dyscalculia.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a real difficulty with numbers, and that gives me a lot of fear around the financial side of my business, taxes, and what I can and can't do. And so for me, money I've kind of, my way around those fears has been make loads of it, hoard it, so you can alleviate that anxiety, but don't spend it. Now, I was very lucky in that my husband, who sadly, my late husband, Ross, he was very good with money and grew up in a different surroundings. So his dad was a Premier League footballer, a lot more money around when he was growing up, a very entrepreneurial space. So he had a very good money mindset. And actually, when we were together and he was alive, he taught me a lot about, he alleviated a lot of that fear for me, and would often say to me, and it's something that still sits with me now when I start to panic about money, he would often say, Holly, don't worry about it. We've got those refilling bank accounts. You just sit tight and it refills itself back up again. If you ever feeling a bit worried about money, just chill for a bit and you'll make it again. It will come back. And he also taught me to be able to spend money as well. And but it's definitely something I have an awareness of, that there's still an area for growth with me. But that I've had to learn, which is a while, I've had to learn to not feel fearful of spending to make more money.
Yeah. Make space for it, basically.
Make space for it. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Make space for it. So there's definitely that. And I think when you're a business owner and there's that worry, that instability worry of, oh, sometimes it's amazing, sometimes it's less than. My default mechanism is hoard it, which is not always a good move. We think it is. I think it gets applauded in most spaces, just save. That's not always a great way of doing things with your money, is it?
Absolutely. And I think that's it. I mean, I often talk about our money archetypes and how our relationship with money is based on 3 of the 8 money archetypes. And what you're talking about there is an accumulator archetype.
Right,
and the accumulator archetype loves to save money. But letting go of that stash of cash is really, really uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable. And you know what? I've said this, so there would never be enough money. This is why I know it's not a money thing. It's not, there would never be a number. Somebody could hand me, and because I have dyscalculia, because I have no concept of how big or small something is, I struggle with what that actually means in reality. So you could give me £1 billion in my bank account, and yeah, I know that's a lot of money, but I don't know if that would change because it's a mindset issue.
Absolutely.
It isn't the money in my bank.
Yeah.
I've had an abundance of money in my bank account, and it still isn't enough because the goalpost moves.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's a different side of a money challenge that people don't necessarily understand, because when you've got money, yeah, but it doesn't it's still if you're living in that fearful mindset around it, it doesn't make any difference.
No. And I think that's it. And I think there's been, loads of stories in the press over the years of the little old lady that lived in the ramshackle house and looked as though, she had no money at all, but she had lots of cats. And then she died, and then they discovered she had millions in the bank, which she left to cat protection. And that is exactly the same as you've spoken about, the fear of running out of money, of not being able to replace that money, can drive emotions and behaviors that then repeat the process, basically. You have that level of awareness. Not everybody does, but you have that level of awareness to be able to behave in a different way. Yeah. And obviously your husband, in saying to you, our bank accounts will refill themselves. it's happened before, the evidence is there, it can do it again. But how do you manage that fear with regards to your attitude towards money, with regards to your children, and passing on the messages, the right messages to your children?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, because it is something I definitely have an awareness of when we're discussing money. I've always discussed money with the kids, and not in a way to make them fearful, but to make it less scary in a way, because often I was party to conversations that made me scared because I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand why that couldn't happen or why somebody was doing that. And even as a parent, you know, your motivations to doing something, it might be financial. I'm doing this, or I'm doing this work because of this. Now, if my children can understand why and what the outcome is, then they can see the benefit. And from being really young, we've discussed mortgages and how you do that. And we've discussed big concepts, I guess, in terms of children. And we have discussed money mindset and what that means. And both of my kids, they're really good with considering money and their spending, and not necessarily in a fearful way, actually, which is really good considering, you know, what I've just said to you.
Yeah.
They've set up their own businesses when they've wanted things. They have, you know, there's been a couple of times when they've wanted to buy something, and I'm not the parent that gives them everything they want just because I can.
Yeah.
I want them to understand the value and also that purpose and that feeling of, you know, getting that money. That's a good achievement. Yeah. My daughter, she bought herself a £90 pair of Nike trainers. She saved up for those trainers. She wanted them for so long. Every single one of her friends had the trainers months before she had them. And I could have swept in and taken that away, but I knew that there was value in her feeling that achievement, feeling the pinch of the money going, feeling all of that stuff. And she has loved those trainers. And every time, you know, when she remembers, oh, I love these trainers, I always say to her, and you got yourself that, you achieved that. That's such a great thing. But we've always had conversations around it. And, you know, I always will explain to the girls, well, when I do this, this means this. And when I do this job, this is going to pay for this. And I explain that stuff to them. And I'm sure, as with all parents, there have been mistakes that I've made along the way in terms of, you know, being mindful of my own fears, but I try to keep things really open. And I think for the girls, largely it's meant that they have a really good awareness of it and appreciation of it as well. You know, I will always talk to them about how lucky we are to have the things that we have. I also say it's not just luck. We took a ton of action.
Got to take credit, exactly.
We took a lot of action steps that were made. It wasn't just fingers crossed and a wing and a prayer. But she, you know, both the girls, I always say to them, you know, we're really lucky. Like, we sometimes have to stop and appreciate what we did create. And, you know, there's, you know, in terms of the spending on things, and really appreciate that. So I think I'm very aware of the words that I use. I'm very conscious of that, even when so over the last year or so, I have property. And for those that are landlords, they will know that it's not quite the fruitful space that it used to be.
Yeah.
And for me, as going from a parent with, you know, a parent where there was two parents, to being a widowed parent, Ross didn't have life insurance. We didn't have any safety net there. So it is just me. Now, at the beginning of that, the properties were picking up the slack of another person's wage in my house. As that squeezed in, you know, I'm still paying mortgages on those properties. I'm still paying tax on the rent. But that over the last few years meant that suddenly I was paying a whopping tax bill on money I did not have in my account. Now, people from the outside can look at that and go, well, that's a nice problem to have. You know, you've got property. Yeah, cool. For the future, that's a great investment. Still the best place to have your money. However, right now, I'm paying the tax man with money I don't have in my account because I didn't earn the money that it looks like I earned because it's not there. And so there was an adjustment period over the last couple of years where I did have to pull back. And there was a lot, for me personally, there was a lot of, it felt like failure. even though I knew logically it wasn't. I knew there was nothing I'd done differently, or
Yeah.
I hadn't been, you know, reckless or anything like that. It was
circumstances.
it was just the change in circumstances.
Exactly.
But there was part of me that, and I had to do some work on that, that saw that as, oh, like that's really uncomfortable. You know, is there something I could have done differently? And there really wasn't. It was just the way things have changed, and adjusting like we would in any business. Sometimes you have to pivot what you're doing with it. But there was a period of time where I was in a position where I was looking at this stuff and going, I need to find a way to work this out. I might be doing well in my business, but if I take money out of my business, then my tax bill goes up here on money I'm not actually earning in my bank. It was like a catch-22. And although, you know, there was, I guess there was a lot of that money story underneath that was, well, it's a nice problem to have, isn't it? You sat there with your houses. And I got that. And so there was like this actual challenge I had to face where I had to work it out. Then there was a layer of shame and guilt because people have got less than, so you can't talk about it because you make other people feel bad when you've got money.
Yeah.
And it was all this stuff that I had to deal with. And the one thing that really pulled me through was my trust in myself to find a way. And I believe that across the board within my work, in my life, I will find a way to work this out. And so I remember I sat, and this was probably a year ago now, and I had all my paperwork out, looking at all my money. I'm looking at where it's coming in here, where it's coming in, where we're leaking money here. How do I solve this? And I sat down with it. I had a cry, because crying is an important release. So
Absolutely.
I had a cry of the frustration of it all and all of that stuff. So we let that release that. And then I looked at it and I just affirmed to myself, I will find a way. I will work this out. I will work this out. And just that mindset shift for me, rather than feeling stuck and panicked and in like shutdown mode, where we think there's nothing I can do, everything, I'm going to die in a ditch, which is where our brains will take us. I sat with it and I said, I will find a way. I'm not sure how to do this, but I will find a way. And by staying in that space, calming my nervous system down, I was then able to make some steps and to move ourselves out of this. And with my daughters, during that period, there was a moment where I felt like I was having to say, we can't do that right now. You're going to have to hold off. But the way I framed it to the girls, because I didn't want to make them worry, one, I always say, we will never struggle. You will always be okay. You never have to worry. You will always be safe. I will find a way with that. That's actually never a worry to me. I know I will find a way, whether I had to go and work for somebody, if I had to do, you know, I would find, I'm not worried about that. So I always said to girls, there's no worry there, but because of this, and I explained the situation to them, probably did their head in trying to explain it because it was confusing. I said, look, it just means until I work this bit out here, we just gotta hang tight, but it'd be just a minute, we'll be caught and it's good and we'll appreciate where we're at and we'll just hold fire, but then we'll work it out and we'll go to the next stage. And by doing that, one, it kept me in a space of finding solutions, but it also didn't worry the girls. And it also, in a nice way, gave them an appreciation as to what we already have. And actually, by doing that, I moved us out of that space much, much quicker than I probably realized I could do that. And it also got the girls in their entrepreneurial space, because there was things where they're like, well,
we help?
Yeah, what can I do? We'll get this for ourselves, you know. Kids these days, I have to say, you know, my oldest daughter, she's rocking in like Dior lip oil and like all her expensive gear that they want. And I am not that parent that's like, you can have whatever. I'm like, you can buy that yourself if you want a Dior lip oil, and you can, you know, find your way to do that. And I will support their businesses. I will support what they do. So they had a bracelet making business for a while. They were invited to every one of my events. They made a killing. They made about 300 quid an event, which was brilliant. And they were even in the Sun newspaper as entrepreneurial kids for a while. And so they did that off their own steam. And what I loved about with their money, they worked together and they kept their money and they put it back in the business. So they had their literal pot of money and they would put it back into the business. They would spend on the beads that they were selling. They would spend on flyers and things like that they needed. But I would always say to them, whatever event they did, you also need to take some money from it yourselves and spend it, because you need to feel the reward of how hard you just worked. You can't just, you know, and this is from my own learning of me going, I would have just hoarded it till it built up a big pile, like cat lady, and I wouldn't have done that in the past. So I really encourage the girls, no, you worked hard that day. You need to go,
and enjoy it.
Money and enjoy it because you deserve it. So that's it's all lessons, and wherever we are at financially, there is always lessons to be learned, and we've just got to keep an eye on what's the story we're making up in our heads. What is the story we're telling ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the really important thing there is that you brought your daughters on that journey. You made them aware that, and you will be very aware of this, I know, that life is not a linear line. There's going to be ups and downs, because children, when their parents are, have enough coming in, there can be the belief that that's the way life is. And when you're an entrepreneur, as you say, that's not the way life is. It's it's ups and downs. But also, we can think that if we think we're hiding things from them, and they won't have that awareness, but they do. They pick up on our moods. They pick up on our emotions. They pick up on our behaviors. So the best thing to do is to bring them in a way that is not fearful, in a way that allows them to feel as though you are treating them still as a child, but not in a childlike way, and that they have something valuable to bring. That might be a cuddle, it might be more support, it might be ideas, etc., etc. So I think you dealt with that beautifully. But something else I want to say to you is, because I got quite emotional as you were talking there, is your level of resilience is outstanding. That's the only word I can use, is outstanding. Because I remember the first time I came across you properly, because Biker Grove was probably after my time, essentially. But I was aware, sadly, when Ross passed away, and you were in the papers talking about, how you dealt with things when he was poorly, and how you dealt with things after he passed away. And to have the level of resilience that you did, to at least publicly not go into a corner and just curl up into a ball and just not do anything, you seem to have, and this may be something you say, well, I've always had it, because that's going to be my question shortly, is you seem to have this level of resilience that is very, very rare in the majority of people. So where does that resilience come from? And how do you keep building that resilient muscle?
Well, firstly, thank you for the lovely compliment, because I guess reality is sometimes we have to be resilient. And I guess maybe that's a cop-out, because as you say, some people will tell me the opposite, that they wouldn't. When, for me, I do think there's a level of that being just really part of my character, but there are stuff that I still did on top of that. I always say that being an actor made me very resilient. I had a purpose from being young. Like, I knew what I wanted to do, and having some kind of purpose to get you through the pain is key. If we can trick our brains into, well, I've got to do this thing that makes me feel uncomfortable, or this thing that's hard, or whether that's going to university, whether that's running your business, learning something new, whether that's going to a million auditions as an actor and failing and getting back up and doing it again, whatever the thing is, if you can see a point to it, then your brain will push you through that pain barrier, that discomfort. I think certainly as a kid, I always, I was told, it's the acting world is really tough, so you've got to have a thick skin, I used to hear, which actually I disagree with. I think kind of, but you've also got to be vulnerable as anything. So you can't really have a thick skin. You've also got to be open enough to be able to get into those emotions and stuff. So maybe that's not strictly true, but I had that an awareness of, I'm going to have to be able to get back up. So I think that helped me initially in terms of being really young and understanding. I knew what I wanted, and I knew it was not the easiest thing in the world. People told me not everyone can do it. So I think that was a good starting point for me. Also, then being the kid on the telly, having to navigate what that wasn't easy. I went to a normal school. I was the kid on the telly, the kid who had money, the kid that stood out. And, that was hard. So I had to navigate that. And then obviously with Ross and him he had brain cancer, having kids. And there was also, within a few years, probably 6 years, there was a period of like, just life going, here you go, here's some stuff to deal with. And us be like, it was my daughter, I was premature, I had preeclampsia, we were in special care, she got meningitis at 3 months old, I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Then my second daughter, we realized I had this autoimmune disease, I had to inject blood thinners into my pregnant belly the whole time. And then we had her, and then Ross was depressed. We then realized that was brain cancer. It was just boom, 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 boom for a few years. And I think for me, when I look at, and I guess it's reflecting back on it, but I did also do this throughout, I just had to keep going back to what is it that I want my life to look like? I want my life to feel good. And my driving force in my life is freedom. I want to be free to do whatever I want. That is the thing that wakes me up in the morning. That's whether we talk about your why, your values, that the most important thing for me is that I do not want to be told what to do ever.
Yeah.
I want to wake up and do whatever I want to do. So for me, it's, however I make that happen matters. I also, like anybody, want to feel that my life has purpose and meaning. And so for me, within my work, I get that kick out of that. So even in my darkest days, and I guess it's also how you tell the story, right? So storytelling is my life from being an actor to being now, but also the stories that we tell ourselves frame the world that we live in. So I decide what that story is going to look like. I know that on paper, and it literally has been in the papers, my story is sad. There are points in my story that are really sad. And it's not that I choose to not acknowledge that, because it's been incredibly, and still is incredibly painful. It's not, I don't, there's no stoicness here. I've cried, I do cry, I lose my temper. I'm an imperfect human like everybody else. But overall, I go back to, well, what do I want my story to be? When Ross died, I could have accepted, and everyone would have accepted the story of, well, her husband's dead now, everything's downhill from here, everything's sad, everything's terrible, she's the victim, she's, this weaker state of being. And I rejected it. And I rejected it when Ross was diagnosed, and we had, everyone wants to tell you their versions of how bad cancer is. I'm not denying that. It's not toxic positivity here. I'm not denying. Two things can be sat side by side. It can be totally horrendous, and also there can be good around it. And that's what I look for, I guess. I look for the good around the pain, because we're not going to avoid the pain. The pain's coming. Sorry to say, everybody, but we're all going to go through it. We probably already have. If you haven't, if you've skimmed through it and you've got this far, fantastic, get ready for it, because it's coming, whatever form it takes. But if we can accept that, and acceptance is huge in terms of resilience as well. I accept that there will be bumps in the road, whatever they look like. But then we build around that and we find the good. And at every stage, I look for the good always, because I know that if I can focus my brain on the good, it gives me respite from the painful stuff. And I guess, for me, it's always been about finding purpose. So even the things that I mentioned, when Brooke had meningitis, I went and supported a meningitis charity and used my platform for that, because it felt like good. It felt like, well, there's something really crap and horrible. Where's the good? Okay, the good could be using this as a lesson for somebody else. Ross gets brain cancer. I talked about that. Ross dying in the hospice. Me talking about Ross dying, which I did on YouTube and I vlogged during the time in the hospice, which, yes, to some people might have been, that's weird. To me, as an actor and somebody whose safe space was being in front of a camera for all of my life, that wasn't weird. It was cathartic. It was helpful. And also going back to resilience building, for me, there was an awareness that I needed to know these answers. Being a young woman who was going through her husband dying, I wasn't finding somebody who was talking like me online anywhere. I know there is people, but I wasn't finding them easily. All I found was misery and sadness and, you know, a black veil and your life is over. And so I wanted to talk openly about that. And so I guess, again, in terms of resilience, for me, my resilience comes from finding the good around the pain and finding something purposeful, you know, finding a point to what has happened. Ross dying, no point to that. That's painful and crap and sad. And my brain, you know, can't compute that even now. But I can find the good around that. And then there feels like there's some kind of good that's come from something bad. And I guess that's where, in terms of resilience, that's what works for me. I do think it is something that we can cultivate and learn. I think we've got to learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. We've got to get comfortable with failure. We've got to stop taking, you know, this I talked about with the money side of things. We've got to stop attaching shame and identity to mistakes or sometimes things that are completely out of our control, and recognize that we can move from wherever we are. But I do think there is a level of resilience training you have to do. You've got to get comfortable with looking stupid, failing, messing up, feeling pain, accepting it, crying, having all your emotions, but then finding your way. You know, I almost think of like, you know, when you see like a rose or a coming through the concrete.
Yeah.
And it gets through somehow. Nature finds its way. And that's how, like, I have that image in my mind. Like, there's a way. Like, I am that plant breaking through the concrete sometimes. And we probably all are, right? If we decide there's a way, there's a way. And it might not be the way you thought it was going to be, but there's a way. But that comes from putting yourself out there, feeling that pain, messing up, coming back. And whether that's finances or any area of your life, it's practice. It's practice and allowing yourself to do all of those things.
And have you surprised yourself at your own level of resilience?
That's a good question. I'm going to think about it.
Because I mean, you were right. From my very limited knowledge of, although saying that, when I was younger, I did crave to be an actress.
Did
And
you?
I did do Amdram.
I love it.
I did apply to go to university to study theatre studies. I did drama A level, etc.
Oh,
But
amazing.
unfortunately, my universities did not recognize the same level of skill in me that I believed I had. So that's where my exactly, that's where my actressing days rapidly came to an end, other than Amdram. But I recognize you do need to be able to take the no's, absolutely. But was your level of resilience there all along, or did it come out because of what you had to go through with Ross's journey?
I think there was a level that it was always there, but I guess there's always new levels to what I don't think it's only, I guess, in retrospect that I look back. I mean, when I think now that Ross was diagnosed in 2014 and the girls were 3 and 1, and I was running my business, I was acting, you know, we were both, me and Ross were running a home, and I was a young mom. I look at that now and I think I've got no idea how I did it. But in the time I was in it, when I look back at the first few years of Ross's death and, you know, the challenges with my oldest and my youngest and everybody being in different points and all of that, I can look back now and go, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I got through it. But I guess in the moment, you're just dealing with it and you're just finding your way. And when you're going through difficult stuff, I think it's always about breaking it down into the next moment. If I'd have looked too far ahead, I'd have blown my own mind. It'd have been too much. It'd have been too big a chunk. So it's about breaking it down into those smaller parts. And I guess I don't know whether I've surprised myself, because I do have a strong sense of belief that I will find a way. I think it's only, I actually have to be very aware to congratulate myself when I have done stuff. And so I do reflect back on stuff and recognize you did good. I mean, even the money stuff I was mentioning recently, I have had to have an awareness of coming out of that and going, you did good. I do that, but I don't think you notice in the moment. And and because I guess I have a belief that there will be a way, maybe I've just become used to it. I'm not sure I do necessarily acknowledge it. It's often when I'm doing stuff like this and somebody else reads out some of the things or talks about the things, I almost see it from through somebody else's eyes. That there's I can see how somebody else might see that as, oh, that's quite a lot to have done. But I guess you don't know, and you don't know if you don't know any other way. And also, I didn't have a choice. Like there are times, I know, I guess the thought is, well, you did have a choice, you could have just given up. But for me, there was no choice. And, as a mum, I was just ready to step up. Like for me, I often say my best work comes when my back's against the ropes and I come out swinging. And I have that. I think I've also made that so much part of my identity that supports me as well. And I do think that's something, if people listening are thinking, well, I don't see myself like that, I feel like I give up, then it is about that identity shift, because I think that does help me. Because I identify as somebody who is resilient, then why wouldn't I take that action? Because I'm identifying as that way. So if you currently don't feel like you are, my acting tip for you is act as if.
Yeah.
So if you can't quite think, if you haven't got the proof in your own life, or you maybe do, but you probably don't think you do, but you probably do have areas of your life where you've been resilient and you could use as proof. But act as if. Think about, if I was a resilient person, what action would I take? And we do that scared. None of the stuff that I've done where I've been resilient and the things that I've done in my life, none of that stuff I've done without fear. None of that stuff.
Yeah.
Fear came with me.
Yeah.
Doubt came with me. None of it was left. Like I didn't, you don't step out onto a stage and do a speaking event, or stage and do a theatre show, or all of the things I've done in my life. You do not step up and do that without any worries, fear, panic. How am I going to? We bring all of that stuff to the table. So if we're waiting for that stuff not to be there, we will be waiting for the rest of our lives for that to change. It won't. So act as if. If you were a resilient person, what would you do next?
Yeah.
And go from there.
Absolutely. I think the be it till you believe it, not the fake it till you make it, but be it till you believe it. I think that is a really, really purposeful way to move you from where you are to where you want to be, but also to recognize in those moments of going on stage, the fear is actually serving you. Because I know I give a much better performance when I have got the nerves than those odd occasions when the nerves haven't shown up, basically. So to look at it as serving you. One final thing I'd like to ask you, with regards to your daughters, because I have this challenge right now, although my boys are older, they're now just 18 and 15. I spent 20 odd years in corporate before I left at 40, 41. And both my children are they're both entrepreneurial. They both kind of do their own little businesses, side hustles, etc. One in particular does not want to join the corporate world, just wants to carry on in his own entrepreneurial way. I'm quite nervous about that, thinking, as we've spoken about the whole ups and downs of entrepreneurial life. And whilst I have no ability to stop him, I have no desire to stop him either. But it is quite hard. So for you and your children, how do you feel about them following a similar journey to you in a less, what's the word I'm looking for? Because when you're in a corporate job, in any job,
secure, I guess it's the security, isn't it?
Security, that's what I'm looking for. Yes. Yeah.
I think that is it. And I guess we're very lucky. The girls are very lucky in that their role models around them, pretty much everyone around them has their own business in some capacity.
Yeah.
So their uncles was a footballer. They run a shop and a teamwear business. A few people around us have had property and rental businesses. Even my dad went from being a welder working in the oil industry. He was also a contract worker, essentially worked, on and off different contract work. So essentially everyone around them is very entrepreneurial. So they have that as a a marker. So it is interesting. And I did consider this when they were really young. We used to, there was a book that we had by Wayne Dyer, so a mindset book, and it was actually about money mindset. And it would talk, one of the bits in it was lots of questions in it, and it was asking about, what different jobs people could do. And I remember asking them, and it was so funny because they went for like artist, footballer, actor. Like they didn't go for, I guess, traditional jobs, maybe like I don't know, a teacher, or they went for like quite out there business ideas, or selling houses, they were saying. And that was quite interesting to me, because obviously I grew up in a very traditional home in many respects. And yeah, my parents always said to me, like, for years they would worry that, Holly's doing this stuff, but like, will she make it work? And I did ask them about that, and my dad said, yeah, we worried sick, like at the beginning, but then you always found a way to make it work. And so we just had to trust and let go of that control, that you were doing it differently and you were making it work. And so for me, I guess, one, I don't have the mod. I've never had a proper job. So I guess I don't have the same fear as someone who has come from that and into, so if you've had two models of it, I haven't had that. So I guess for me, it's just building them up enough to know you'll find a way. And if I can teach them, they will find a way. And I've always said to the girls, and continue to, you don't have to be one thing forever.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to just make a decision.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Like you don't, why have we fed, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. No, I mean, exactly. You want to know what you want to be. When I grow up, I might want to be something different. Who knows? So I've always said to them, look, find things that you like and build your life around that. That's the key to success. It doesn't have to be one thing. My oldest currently wants to do acting and singing and go that route. But I always say to her, but have other things, that you can do, so you can have some money here and you feel in control. My youngest is very much into sport. And so we often talk about lots of routes into sport and what she could do. But I always say, we used to talk a lot actually when they were younger. They used to say, I want to do this. They would say a job. And then they would say, but is that one you have to go to every day? And I would say, that's the everyday one. And they're like, oh no, I don't fancy that one. Yeah. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, then, maybe you could do a bit of this, or maybe you could do your own business. So I guess they're still young, so maybe we'll always worry about our kids, won't we? Whatever they do.
Absolutely.
I think in a weird way, my worry is when they tell me they want a proper job, which is wild, I guess, to most people. When they tell me, like, if my youngest for a while was like, I want to be a PE teacher, and there's nothing against PE teachers, by the way, here, it's a great job, but there was part of me that felt like it might limit her. So I was like, but are you sure? Because you have to go there every day. Are you sure about that? Like, you could do lots of things. You could, maybe if you learn about PE and you learn about sports, and there's lots of things you could do there, like trying to I'm like the opposite way. I don't want my children to limit themselves. I work with so many men and women, particularly women, who get to the age I am, and they've just, and like you said, I'm about to hit 40 this year, and we get to this point, and we've done what we thought we should do, and we've been the good girl, and we've done the work. And it doesn't mean we didn't enjoy it along the way. I'm not saying it was all bad or anything. And there's a place for both mindsets in terms of course there is. But sometimes we get ferried into it out of fear, out of needing security, out of needing to pay the bills, out of other people's expectations. They get to 40, 50, and then we're like, I don't know who I am, and I'm not enjoying any of this. So for me, it's just, I want to keep my girls' minds open enough to go explore, see where it takes you, but don't limit yourself or keep yourself stuck, because the world is vast, and even more than ever before, there are so many ways to make money, and you don't have to limit yourself in any way. So I guess they're young enough that I just want them to find their route, and I will support whatever they want to do.
And I think given what you do, you want them to be happy.
That's it. Exactly that. I just want them to find they're happy, and I will not dictate what that looks like either. They've got to find their route themselves.
Which is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So how can people connect with you, Holly?
Well, they can find me on social media. I do hang out mostly on Instagram. I'm talking a lot about confidence on my TikTok account. So if people are looking to build their self-belief and their confidence, I'm doing a lot of videos on there that are nice, chunk down videos for you to have some tips and some hacks and some tricks. I have my membership, which is the Happy Me Project membership, which I know you're going to put all the links below, so we'll pop that below as well. That is a safe space to land. So if you're in a space where you're in a transitional part of your life, or you're like, you've just been through something tough, or you're in the middle of your tough stuff, or you're walking yourself towards a goal that you have, that is a space where I go live. I do live coaching, and we do monthly group coaching. Today is our group coaching session, and we're talking all things confidence today, actually. And it's a really lovely community in there where people support each other, and you also get tools and tricks to support you with your mindset in there. So people can find me, Google my name, and I always say, if you can't find me on the internet, then the internet is broken, and you must phone somebody and tell them what's going on here. You'll find me
Dear
somewhere.
Google.
But do let me know that you've come from this podcast, because it's always nice to know where people came from, and hear your stories as well, and what resonated from this podcast.
Oh, that's amazing. And I wish we had longer to talk, because there's so many questions I could ask you, because it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for coming on, and all your details will be in the show notes. And it's just fantastic to have the opportunity to talk to you, to get to know you a little bit better. And everybody listening, go and connect with Holly, because she's amazing. And I'm going to start following you on TikTok, because I'm rubbish on TikTok. So I'm going to come
I'm a little
you.
rubbish. And because my daughters are obviously young and cool, they're like, why have you not got 1 million followers on TikTok? You're nobody. And so I'm like, I'm trying my best, guys. Give me
Our children, always critics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Keep us on our toes.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Holly. Catch up with you again, hopefully soon.
Thank you.